CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, Joel R. Johnson.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back, welcome back. I hope you got a chance to get refreshed out there, have a cup of coffee, and get ready for our next exciting panel. I encourage you, if you are taking notes and sharing any of this incredible inspiration online and social media, that you use our hashtag, CHOW2024. I'm heartened to hear that we've had some pretty lively conversations out there during the break, and I hope you had a chance to start to meet some of the great sponsors who are hosting these booths here at the Capitol Hill Ocean Week, and giving you an opportunity to learn more about the critical work that they do to protect our ocean. If you didn't make it during this break, please plan to spend some time at the National Marine Sanctuary's Affinity Space in the Oceanic Suite. National Marine Sanctuaries are at the forefront, of course, of addressing these issues in climate change. All right, I am very pleased to introduce our next plenary session, Leadership for Climate Action. For opening remarks, I'm going to be welcoming to the stage Nicole LaBeouf, Assistant Administrator for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Ocean Service, and a great partner of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. As the Assistant Administrator for NOAA's National Ocean Service, Nicole LaBeouf oversees strategy and operations for America's premier coastal and ocean agency. NOS addresses economic, environmental, and social pressures on our oceans and coasts, including climate change. And she also serves as the U.S. representative to the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, promoting U.S. best practices in ocean sciences for sustainable development and climate adaptation. Previously, Nicole was NOS's Deputy Assistant Administrator and NOAA's Finance Lead during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and we thank her for those efforts. Her international expertise includes overseeing NOAA's Antarctic marine resource conservation and bycatch reduction efforts in multiple international treaties. Please welcome to the stage Assistant Administrator LaBeouf.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Joel. Although being the introductory speaker behind Bailey Bass, not fair at all. Hello and welcome everyone to CHOW. It's always an honor to participate in Capitol Hill Oceans Week and to share a space with other ocean champions. Like many of you, I knew that I wanted to work with the ocean, in the ocean, on the ocean, for the ocean at a very young age. Looking back on my upbringing, the ocean played an outsized role in my development, who I wanted to be and who I've become. Looking at the present and into the future, we now know that the ocean plays an outsized role in both expressing and in mitigating the effects of climate change. In fact, we will not be able to take effective action to prepare for and to minimize climate impacts without caring for and working with the ocean. This notion might not be so obvious to the public, nor to decision makers around the world, that ocean leadership is climate leadership. We have a responsibility and an opportunity to spread the word about how vital the ocean is as a climate solution, whether we're influencing policy, spurring innovation, guiding business decisions, or engaging youth. With this responsibility and opportunity come challenges. That's because spreading this word means engaging different people with different cultures, different professional vocabularies, different cares and concerns across different timescales. When it comes to ocean climate leadership, we have to convey decadal predictions on an international scale, like with global projections of sea level rise, but also near-term localized forecasts such as high tide flooding on a daily basis. In our communications, we have to make climate change threats tangible, our advice practical, and our solutions doable. Doable not just because we say they are, but because they were developed with users and with the end use in mind. These are foundational attributes of climate and ocean leadership. And they apply across the board, not just with sea level rise. Let's talk about coral. Hundreds of millions of people across the world depend on healthy and thriving coral reefs as a source of food, jobs, and protection from increasingly intense storms and flooding. Coastal countries and communities rely on the revenues that reefs generate for both tourism and fisheries. Humanity also benefits from the products of coral reefs, such as medicines derived from coral reef organisms. When it comes to protecting coral reefs, those in the know, like us, must communicate the importance of corals to decision makers and take on leadership roles that accelerate action that support corals as they are facing multiple global climate stressors, such as unprecedented rates of coral bleaching and mortality. We know that we are currently experiencing the fourth global coral bleaching event driven by marine heat stress. The threat is tangible. We know this because NOAA's Coral Reef Watch uses remote sensing data to track the status of corals, allowing NOAA to sound the global alarm about mass bleaching events where and when they are occurring so that local scientists, decision makers, and communities can act. The advice is practical. We will soon hear from my good NOAA colleague and ocean leader, Sarah Fangman, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary Superintendent. Corals and people working for corals like Superintendent Fangman need cost-efficient and effective solutions to enable the survival of coral reefs in Florida and around the world. And are these solutions doable? They are. NOAA and our partners are implementing targeted management and restoration activities to try and save the remaining corals in Florida and worldwide. Sea level rise and the threats of coral reefs are just two examples where the world needs our voices, our science, our advocacy, our influence, and our commitment. I picked these two topics among many others because I've just returned from the fourth meeting of the Small Islands Developing States meeting convened by the United Nations. For small island developing states like Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Kiribati, and many more, the threat of sea level rise and the loss of coral reefs are among their top concerns. For them, the threats could not be more tangible. Their need for practical advice and doable solutions could not be more urgent. As leaders in the ocean climate space, we are all aware of the clear and present danger that climate change for small island developing states presents, but also for all of us. We have a responsibility and an opportunity to communicate these and other issues across timescales, across geographies, across disciplines, across communities, and with people that may not yet know how important the ocean is to our planet's survival. We have a responsibility and an opportunity to leverage our passion, our expertise, and our roles to promote ocean and climate leadership. As the Assistant Administrator of NOAA's National Ocean Service, as a member of the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force, a co-chair of the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force, and as the U.S. representative to the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, I take my responsibilities seriously. And I take every opportunity that I have to promote exchanges between regional, national, and international entities to raise awareness about the need for ocean climate action. You can too. Each and every one of you can leverage your passion, your expertise, and your roles to promote ocean and climate leadership and demonstrate that ocean leadership is ocean action, and that climate leadership is climate action, and that ocean action is climate action. With that, I want to thank you for being here and thank you for your dedication to our ocean and a prosperous future for all. Enjoy the panel.
Thank you, Assistant Administrator LaBeouf. It is now my pleasure to introduce Ebony Twillery Martin. Ebony is the Executive Director of Greenpeace USA. To win the fight for our planet, this planet, our only planet, the climate movement must be powered by racial justice. That is the reason why Ebony got involved in the environmental justice movement. As a visionary strategist, operations and program design leader with proven success in building interdisciplinary teams, Ebony leads cultural change to foster justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now as the executive director at the largest national legacy environmental organization, Ebony is a champion for advancing racial and environmental justice. She's leading Greenpeace in the fight to dismantle systems of oppression and engage more Black and brown communities in this work so that there can truly be a greener, more peaceful, and just world for all. Please welcome to the stage Ebony Twillery Martin.
So good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Joel and his staff for a wonderful and inspiring CHOW. So We all know in this room, I'll state the obvious, that ocean solutions are climate solutions. Our ocean is the heart of our planet. And just as our hearts beat to circulate blood throughout our bodies to regulate our temperatures, our oceans circulate heat and moisture throughout our bodies, well, throughout the earth actually, to regulate the atmosphere and the climate. But dangerous and extractive practices like offshore drilling and deep sea mining actually undermine this. Our ocean, it generates 50% of the oxygen we need, 25% of all carbon dioxide emissions are absorbed by the ocean, and 90% of those carbon dioxide emissions, the heat that is produced from them, is captured by the ocean. But again, dangerous practices undermine the ability of the ocean to do this, and it threatens life in all of its forms. So in order for us to reverse the worst impacts of the climate crisis, we need healthy oceans. So let me say something else that's pretty obvious. There are a lot of people outside of this room who have power, and they also know that ocean solutions are climate solutions. And we're waiting to see what they'll do with their power. But I want to talk today about a far bigger group of people, the people who are on the front lines and who are impacted by the climate crisis and who don't necessarily have the power. I want to talk today about how we reach them, because we're not waiting on them. They're waiting on us. So I have a confession. I didn't come up through the Saul Alinsky School of Organizing, and I don't have a degree in marine biology, although you couldn't have told me that I wasn't going to be an oceanographer growing up playing on the beaches in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And since my swim lessons didn't quite pan out the way that I thought they would, I settled for being executive director of Greenpeace. Not too shabby. But seriously, my journey into Greenpeace and climate activism began as a mom, when my then 3-year-old son was diagnosed with asthma. And I expected the doctor to ask me questions about his symptoms or to ask me about my family history. But instead, she asked me where I lived and whether I was surrounded by grass or trees. And she told me that my neighborhood's pollution was the probable cause of my son's asthma. And as a mother, this shook me to my core, because you just want your child to feel better. Now, if your child's in pain, you can give them Tylenol or Motrin, but what do you give your child when they can't breathe? So I began to research, and I learned that Black and brown children are disproportionately impacted by asthma. Moreover, Black and brown communities suffer from higher rates of respiratory and heart disease, premature birth, cancer, all types of things. And what makes matters worse is these communities are often silenced through voter suppression and bogus lawsuits. And so the very policies or the green policies that would benefit these communities, they're being excluded from. And so that's why I believe the fight to save our planet, our only planet, the climate justice movement must be powered by racial justice. So what do we mean by environmental justice? And what does leadership look like in this space when, quite frankly, it doesn't look like communities that look like me? And when I became executive director of Greenpeace, I wondered, was there a way that we could use Greenpeace's bold and strategic communication style and campaign savvy to partner with and build with these communities that are on the front line and who are impacted? I believe that we could, but we had to take a deeper look at ourselves. And so we began the process of recalibrating our policies, our procedures, the way that we work, to make our culture more kind, more inclusive, more equitable, and ultimately impactful. When I started Greenpeace 11 years ago, we were 13% people of color. Today, that number is 57%. Thank you. And we didn't just stop there. We had to apply these strategies in our work, in the way that we campaign, and who that we identified as leaders, because leaders aren't always the policy officials, as you know. And so we rooted and grounded ourselves in racial justice pillars, and these pillars guide the way that we work. It guides who we partner with and how we partner with. And these pillars, we call them cultural shift pillars, and they're leading from a place of care and compassion, leading from a place of humility and generosity, and leading from a place of connection and solidarity. So what does that look like? In our fisheries campaign, for example, leading from care and compassion means that we focus our support on those who are most harmed from ocean destruction. And in our fisheries campaign, we specifically highlight the needs of the fishers who are isolated for months at a time or longer beyond their consent on these vessels to produce unsustainable fishing practices. And on these vessels, these fishers experience the worst impacts of human rights abuses, ranging from bondage to debt theft, to wage theft, to physical violence, to fatal illness. And then they're isolated, cut off from their families, and unable to speak with them. So in 2023, we wanted to figure out a way to support these fishers in communicating. That was our goal. And so we took our ship, the Rainbow Warrior, to the Indian Ocean alongside one of these vessels and provided Wi-Fi for these fishers to be able to communicate with their families, their friends, their unions, their governments. And it's a small act, but it shows leading with care and compassion, because often environmental harm goes hand in hand with treating communities as expendable, and we can't allow that to happen. Leading from a place of humility and generosity. So, as you all know, this work is very hard. It's messy, it's nuanced. There's usually no easy solution. So you have to be humble and recognize that, because sometimes you might think you're the expert, but you still can't come up with a solution. And you have to be generous with one another as we work together to find solutions. And so this is exemplified in our deep sea mining campaign, which we launched in 2021. But long before we launched this campaign, Indigenous communities have been raising awareness about the danger and threat of deep sea mining and had built strong campaign and grassroots networks up and down the Pacific. And so we thought at Greenpeace, how could we support and amplify this work? Because our allies were already leading. And so in 2023, what became important for us was ensuring that these communities had voice in political international debates. And so we began to invite these communities to the International Seabed Authority. And in 2023, we ceded our seat to our good friend and ally, who we all know as Uncle Saul. And Uncle Saul addressed that delegation, and he told them about the ocean as the deep place, or the deep ocean as the birthplace of his ancestors. And he changed the conversation. In fact, one of the metal company executives, one of the more aggressive ones, said to him, "Uncle Saul, you've changed the conversation, and we're listening." And in the winter of 2023, Greenpeace also began to track the Hidden Gem, which is a large deep-sea mining vessel, and that deep-sea mining vessel was headed to the shores of Hawaii. And so we gave Uncle Saul a call and our allies in the region, and they invited us to join them in a show of resistance, Hawaiian resistance to this deep-sea mining vessel that thought that they were going to come and bother our friends and allies. When the ship saw the show of resistance on the shore, they actually turned around and said, "We don't want that smoke." So they headed off to Asia. But that act alone sparked a greater conversation between the metals company and the Hawaiian natives. It was covered across all of the local news stations there, all of the newspapers. And that's how you lead with humility and generosity. And finally, leading with connection and solidarity. So Greenpeace wants to work in a way that transcends barriers, transcends boundaries, and works across difference in culture. And so we partnered and sent large delegations to the High Seas Treaty at the Intergovernmental Conference in New York. And as you all know, we got that treaty passed. We are also working very closely in partnership with last night's awardee, Violet Sage Walker, and the Northern Chumash Tribal Council in support of the first indigenous national marine sanctuary. And we're also continuing to campaign in Hawaii, where we'll take our ship again, the Rainbow Warrior 3, to campaign on a goal shared amongst all of us in this room, 30 by 30, ensuring that 30% of the oceans in this world will be highly protected by the year 2030. And that's how we lead with connection and solidarity. Because we don't have a question today of science. We know the science. What we have today is a question of leadership and how we show up. If we are to reverse the worst impacts of this climate crisis, it is imperative that we build the strongest, boldest, most diverse coalition possible and ensure that the communities that are the worst impacted are on the front lines and leading that fight. And the only way that we can do it is with care and compassion, connection and solidarity, and humility and generosity. And I know that you all in this room are committed to this fight. Greenpeace is committed to this fight, as we all are committed to this fight for our future, for our children, for our planet, and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for that powerful, powerful, powerful message, Ebony Twillie Martin. I'm pleased to introduce our panel's moderator, Beth Kotula. An Alaskan with a lifetime of experience in politics in Alaska, Beth has served for 15 years in the State House, including 7 as Minority Leader. Beth is a lawyer and a former director of the National Ocean Council in the Executive Office of President Obama. She is the immediate past board president of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. She's also the recipient of the U.S. Coast Guard's highest civilian honor, the Distinguished Public Service Award. Currently, Beth is part of a NSF-funded project now working with Indigenous Alaskans on scientific, political, and social issues, including climate change. Please welcome Beth Kotula.
When I talk, all politicians get used to that, so I'm just going to start this way briefly and then turn right to the panel. I am an Alaskan. All my friends here will tell you that's all I talk about. And today I'm wearing a traditional kuspuk, which is worn by Yupik women on the northwest coast of Alaska and in the interior. And I'm doing it today to honor the people on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta who will no longer be able to subsistence fish this year. That's not just protein. My friend Joel Moffat talked a bit about the threat to culture, the really existential problems that we all over the world, but we in Alaska, due to our geography, we're going first. And I can't begin to tell you about the horrible feeling you have when you start to see no salmon returning. You start to see the polar bear failing. You start to see people their homes going into the ocean. So I'm here to represent that thought and to also say, we can't quit leading. Your leadership, everyone in this room is a leader. Please don't stop. If you stop, then we truly do go first, and I can't imagine it. So, with that, I'm sorry, sobering intro, I want to turn a little bit to the panel to ask them to each say a small thing about themselves, just so you're oriented to the phenomenal panel, the depth, the breadth of knowledge, and then we'll get right to questions. Please give us questions. If we can work them in, we certainly will. So with that, I'm turning back to Ebony for a few words, and we'll just go down the line, and then we'll have a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I just did give an opening, but I'm a DC native, and like I said, I've been at Greenpeace for 11 years and led a lot of our equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and am so excited to be here and share the stage with these wonderful leaders as the fight to save our ocean.
Thank you, Ebony. I'm Sarah Fangman, Superintendent of Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. The sanctuary is a national treasure that is enjoyed by about 5 million people a year. So there's a lot of human activity there, and those people are drawn to the natural resources that we are protecting. But all of that visitation, all of those activities result in pressures locally. We are also experiencing significant pressures from global threats. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, and we are definitely experiencing those global threats and changes as we speak in the Florida Keys.
Thank you, Beth. I work at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I have spent probably a significant part of my adult life working on drafting or helping draft the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, and worked in various capacities in the United Nations and in the Green Climate Fund. But for the past few years, I have focused exclusively on the role that oceans play in climate solutions. And there is a lot that need to be talked about, and delighted to see so many of you here with interest in this topic, and look forward to doing that.
Justin.
Beth, thank you very much. Lovely to be here, and thank you for the organizers for asking me. My name is Justin Mundy. I have too many decades experience in working on climate change and development issues, both in the British government, in the World Bank, then as a negotiator, and then doing various other things, a lot of it in the private sector. At the moment, I'm, amongst other things, the managing director at the Howden Group, which is an insurance broker. Much of my focus really for the last 20 years has been on how you build resilience and therefore reduce risk, both at a macro level but also at a local community level. I think for my sins it was my idea to come up with something called a blue bond, which we started off in the Seychelles about 15 years ago, as well as helping to put in place various regulatory frameworks around investment in the blue economy. So it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you all. I want to start off with just a general question. And again, for all of you, and you've seen the depth, right? I mean, we're talking international leadership. We're talking the Florida Keys, a huge, huge amount of area. We're talking the world. And I'm just wondering if you could say a few words, and I think we'll start with I can call them by their first names, they're gonna let me do that. So we'll start with Rama, I mean no disrespect. So I'm gonna start with Rama to just talk a little bit about what impactful
ocean climate leadership means in the work you're doing personally.
Right. Thank you for that question, Beth. And let me start by saying that the leadership on climate issue generally began with the scientific community, with the Villach and Bellagio conferences, and then, as Nicole LaBeouf just talked about, with island states. Scientists put a spotlight on what we are doing to the Earth's climate system, and what the island states have done is it is a question of survival for them. And since then, of course, the leadership has gone on to governments, and from the governments to subnational entities and private sector and so on. But the question that you're asking me is about the ocean and the role that they play in climate. And it hasn't, while we all acknowledge, and the world community acknowledges, the role of ocean in climate system, it has not been factored in the negotiations or in the texts that were adopted, even including the Paris Climate Agreement. There is a passing reference to ocean, but that's about it. What we at the Woodsell Oceanographic are trying to do is to change that, and we began that by building a robust partnership amongst the scientific organizations around the world by launching what we called the Ocean Pavilion at the Sharm el-Sheikh Conference of the Parties. And they have taken on a leadership role, all of them, scientific institutions, philanthropic communities, and governments. They have come and joined us as part of the Ocean Pavilion. And their collective effort led to ocean being recognized as a major part of the climate solution. And we have now text in the global stocktake and in the global goal on adaptation. And so it is continuing. But the leadership, of course, is we need to think about this not just as ocean and climate, but on the climate generally, because that has a profound impact on what we do with ocean.
Altogether, yes. I want to come back maybe closer to home. Sarah, could you talk about leadership in the Keys? I know the distressing facts, and God bless you for continuing your work.
Yeah, I think for me, leadership in the face of the issues that we're dealing with there's two things that come to mind: risk and speed. Not two things we normally think of with government agencies, but we have to be willing to take risks to face these challenges because they're unlike anything we've done before. And so we can't use the old tools that we have historically depended upon. So we have to take risk. And then we have to do it fast because we cannot afford to wait. And so we have to find ways to move more quickly on the regulatory side, which is where I am as an MPA manager. And so those are our challenges, to really try to be willing to be bold, try new things, and do it quickly.
It's kind of tough to do together, eh? Justin, could you tell us a little bit about leadership on the global scale with your international financing for the environment?
Well, you are kind. If I may be bold enough to answer that and then add a small different bit at the end. I love what you both said, particularly and Sarah, this thing of risk and speed. It strikes me that in the political context in which we're living, it's very easy endlessly to have your default position of a compromise. And we are now at 1.5 degrees. We have crossed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. We don't have time for compromise. What we need, and leadership is the only thing which will provide that, is for people to say, this is a red line and we must not cross it. And that means that we have given ourselves, for the last 20 or 30 years, this sort of hyperbole of, a fictional hyperbole of saying, a stick and carrot approach is what we need. We have become amazingly adept brilliantly innovative at giving ourselves a lot of carrots. We have a tragedy of glazed carrots. Every time we have a problem, we come up with a nicer carrot. I love carrots, but you can only have so much of a good thing. What it might be helpful to have occasionally, as in now, is a stick. And the political courage to say, we are now going to have a regulatory system which is a stick. It is a disincentive for poor behavior. That is what we need. The other, if I may, the other side of that is that often in my life, in different ways, one can be criticized for not having moved quickly enough, not having had the success, which certainly one would have anticipated and wanted. But so much of any intervention, any discussion, any narrative, to Joel's fantastic skills as a narrator, is a conversation. To have that conversation, you need people on the other side to understand what's going on. And I think an equal bit of leadership to providing a stick for a carrot is actually in everybody in this room, individuals, how local communities operate. When you're sitting in a restaurant, I'm allergic to fish, so this doesn't apply to me. But when you're sitting in a restaurant, you say, and is this certified? Where did this come from? Right. And actually individuals in their communities saying enough is enough. We must ourselves take responsibility for what we're doing, rather than allowing a process of political disenfranchisement to give us a sort of a white card. So leadership is ourselves taking ownership of our actions. And that is probably the most critical thing.
That's wonderful. I have to say, I don't eat fish outside of Alaska. If I haven't caught it or a friend hasn't caught it, I don't try it. In DC, when I first came, it was remarkable to me to see people coming out with big platters of fish, bleeding out the color. So they had been colored. So I think you're exactly right. But Ebony, you did such a fabulous, fabulous TED Talk. Thank you. I'm going to change it a little bit, but Justin did mention the individual. How do we get from individual to doing the kinds of things Greenpeace is now doing on environmental justice in particular?
I think what everyone has mentioned around speed and taking risk and with the stick, it requires courage, because we have the science which has already told us the solutions. And now it's up for us to be bold and courageous to stand in those solutions and to actually start to execute them. And that's one of the things that I think is holding us back. We can't continue to put, at the end of the day, it's profit in treating communities as expendable. And someone has to find that boldness and that courage to say, enough is enough, and we're choosing different.
Sarah, do you think enough is enough? I mean, I know we have talked about people asking, like, why bother? Like, why? I mean, we're losing the Keys fast, the coral reefs, I mean. Why bother with that? I mean, why not go on to something else?
And I get that question. People ask that, why are you doing this? This is a lost cause. Obviously, I don't believe that. And I don't think we can afford to take that path. These reefs are incredibly important to our community, to our economy. Tourism is the largest economic resource or driver in the Florida Keys. After that, it's commercial fishing. These things are dependent upon reefs. However, what people don't think about is the coastal protection value that our reefs provide. Hundreds of millions of dollars of coastal protection value every single year. We can't afford not to have the corals because we would lose so much of our economy, our culture, our communities. So I think that we need to be thinking about this a little bit differently and understand we can't afford not to invest in protecting these places, because there is so much to lose. And I don't think people really think about it in that financial way. Most of the time we think of these reefs as just ecologically beautiful, dynamic places that we love to visit. But in fact, they're an investment. And we need to invest in them, because otherwise we're gonna pay in a different way.
beautiful, and I think we in Alaska completely agree. That just segues beautifully, though, into a question about investment for you, Justin. And the question we had was, how are risk and insurance concerns driving investment and attention into climate and ocean policy? I mean, we're seeing insurers in America start to dump insurance, and that's something at the National Ocean Council that we just began to see 10 years ago, but we knew it was going to be a big issue, and of course it is. Could you talk a little about that?
I can a bit. I must say it's lovely following Sarah in these conversations because she positions it perfectly for you. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. This could be a long answer. But there are three levels of this, I think. The first is Sarah's really valuable point about we cannot afford not to invest. So the opportunity cost of not having coral reefs, not having mangroves, not having coastal defences, not having intact ecosystems is that year on year the material damage to infrastructure, to livelihoods, to communities, to food security will rise. And each year we have another level of the highest amount of premium paid, the highest amount of carbon provided. So there are instruments, there are insurance instruments and risk management instruments which are out there, which are effective. Parametric cover so that you can anticipate what's going to happen with triggers and heat and warming, wind temperature, which means you get an immediate payout, which is usually no less, but no more expensive than an ordinary insurance cover. But that needs to be, so there's lots to be done there, and we're seeing this going on in coastal areas where, the question is, what happens if you can't get insurance? Well, if you can't get insurance, you can't insure a house. If you can't insure a house, you can't get a mortgage, then the housing market collapses. And businesses collapse, because if you can't actually get insurance to cover what used to be quite a sort of suboptimal risk, but is now every year a material risk, then the business case for economic development becomes quite shaky. So we have to find a way of ensuring and ensuring that people are actually looking at risk management, and insurance is part of that to do that. At the next level up, we're seeing this in terms of how this operates in some of the nationalisms around debt swaps, around ensuring aspects of debt swaps and credit and credit enhancement. And here there's insurance products which are looking at marine protected areas, which are looking at coastal ecosystems, which are looking at coral reefs. So actually you can provide an insurance cover if things go wrong, but only if you've actually put in place the adaptation plan, the marine protected management plan that you require. And that is part of the stick approach that we need, because if actually we don't have that conditionality embedded across the financial mechanism, what we are merely doing is providing an incentive for poor behavior. And poor behavior is now catastrophically expensive. And the last point, if I may, Beth, is that at the top level, where I spend top in terms of sovereign debt, where I spend a lot of my time, some of us are trying to put in place a system which links the KPIs around NDCs, so national climate plans, BSAPs, biodiversity strategy action plans, adaptation plans, to how credit rating agencies look at sovereign risk. You would be insane to provide debt to a country that is not only not taking action to minimize its exposure, but actually taking action to increase its vulnerability. If you do that, you have a vicious circle where you are indebted, and we have a massive problem globally on debt, mostly in the most vulnerable countries to climate change, mostly those countries where economic and social political instability is now turning to hard security issues. If we can find a way of and so that means they don't have access to capital, they don't have investment, they don't have any fiscal headroom. So if now we're able to have a virtuous circle, whereby the KPIs linked to insurance and risk management provide a way of linking to the regulatory framework, as Sarah mentioned, to private sector investment, and we are diminishing risk. If you diminish risk, you increase access to markets, you increase employment, you increase fiscal headroom, you diminish the debt, And you do that by building an incentive structure to ensure compliance with policies that governments and communities and regions have already adopted. If we can't do that, then we are in a great deal of trouble, because we need to do it very quickly. Sorry, it's an appallingly long answer. Those who have fallen asleep, sleep on. But, sorry.
I think I need to take a class with you. But thank you. No, really, that's a really amazing answer, and thank you for teaching that. I've learned much from all of you already. Rama?
I want to ask you,
Because you've also worked at international levels, and you've worked at a lot of other levels.
how can there be better collaboration?
Between the work of national, state, international, what do you see that needs to happen?
Well, I mean, I would answer that, but let me first go back to some of the discussion that preceded. Investments are important, and we are not doing really enough of that, and that's something that we have to face head on before we go into what kind of stick we might use to ensure behavior, compliance. We talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and the Goal 14 dealing with life underwater, and it is widely acknowledged that that is the least funded of all of the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can look at that in terms of money, investments going into research. Ocean research, the funding for it, is again at the very bottom of it. When you take government funding and philanthropic funding and then look at how much is going into the ocean, it's really a very low number. And the number across the board is about, the OECD statistics say it's about 1.5% is going into the ocean research. And so we need to change that. The second point is, much of what we are trying to do in terms of climate stabilization is at the global level. We need action at the global level. And the world community, as we know, is very different, not just in terms of economic structures, but social and cultural and ability to do what they must do is very different as well. And there too, the investments, whether you call it funding, et cetera, make a huge difference. And unless we get that right, we cannot just talk about, how do we penalize countries that have agreed to implement the agreements and not doing that. And so that's a very crucial point. And it is not enough to just call it an existential threat. We need to act like it is. And that means putting money where it's going to make the maximum amount of impact. Now, you asked about the question of research and what might we be doing, et cetera. Now, one of the things that the international panel, intergovernmental panel on climate change has done, in fact, that preceded the General Assembly calling for negotiations for a framework convention on climate change. And what that panel has done is really build scientific capability across various countries around the world. And if you're a decision maker, you do not want to rely on science coming from a different country. You want to be able to say, my own scientific community is saying this. And that's what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has done. And so by doing that, we have now ability of number of different governments to think about not only the NDCs, how to develop them, nationally determined contributions, and how to implement them. And that is, again, quite a vital part of it. We now have a lot of governmental support to climate stabilization, but that is not reflected in terms of the concentration of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And again, we have the IPCC to rescue to say what needs to be done. And then they have come to the conclusion that while we continue to phase out the use of fossil fuels, we need to draw the carbon that is in the atmosphere through carbon dioxide removal. And that's, again, we need to draw upon the scientific community to say how to do that safely and how to store it safely so that we buy the time that is necessary to keep the temperature increase from going beyond 2 degrees Celsius. We're already at 1.5, as we have all noted.
Would Sarah or Ebony, would you like to talk about investment at all, or I can switch to a different topic? I'm really interested. These are really so complicated, and we know. I think Ebony said it right. Yeah, it's messy, it's complicated and nuanced. How do you all personally, what do you think is important in affecting policymakers who are going to be making these decisions? Hopefully they're right decisions, so that we can have those kind of, you know, marks that we can't go past. And I'm just going to start with Ebony, and, you know, feel free to work off of each other. You've been doing that beautifully.
That's a really good question. I think in terms of policy, we need a people-powered movement that pushes the policymakers and holds them accountable and reminds them that they aren't working for their own good or for their profits or for their friends to line their pockets. They're actually working for us and ensuring that we have the protections that we need to see our communities thrive. It is disheartening to see values fall by the wayside in this fight, because it's much deeper than what we see on the surface. And I believe the only way that we will catalyze and will push and make change is for all of us to join together. And transformational movement history tells us you only need 3.5% of the population united together in an effort to achieve change. And in this country, that's only 11.5 million Americans.
Only.
Yes, only. Only. Because it's possible. And we have to remember that, and we have to believe it. And we have to push towards it.
Sarah, how do you go about this? How do you influence policymakers so that we save the keys, save the coral?
So I'm involved in a project in the Florida Keys called Mission Iconic Reefs. It is a very ambitious coral restoration program that was launched in 2019. At the time, it was one of the largest in the world, aimed to try to address coral decline in the Florida Keys, try to turn things around, not turn back the clock, but try to help these reefs become resilient and regenerative once again. And I'm really proud of that work and inspired by the people that work on it, some of whom are here. And I'm worried that that may be misconstrued as all we need to do. We just need to plant more coral, and all will be fine. And that's not true. And so for me, the challenge is, how do we balance, yes, this is a solution for now, but it's buying time. Right. It's not ultimately going to be the solution. We need solutions at the national level, the global level, so that we can truly achieve what we're trying to do with these reefs and restoration. So it's a difficult balance to try to keep inspiring and keep working hard to do restoration, but also elevate the need for these bigger global solutions.
It's really hard work. I thank all of you for this work. This is amazing work, and you are leaders at this amazing scale, but it's everybody. I totally believe that, and it's all of you individually, too. Rama, what do you say to world leaders when they're trying to struggle to figure out, or, you know, do they ignore it, or do they not want to hear about it?
I mean, we have now reached a stage where there is agreement amongst leaders that this is an existential threat, that we must stabilize the climate system. But unlike many other global issues where leaders can come together and agree on it and make something happen, the greenhouse gases is a different ballgame. It's all of us. And so that leadership now needs to transcend from the global to national to subnational communities to individuals. And so that requires the ability to understand what the issues are, and if we continue on the current path, what the future might mean to us, to our children, our grandchildren, and so on. So I think we are getting to that point, but we don't, the urgency of the matter is such that we need to act now. And we don't have time for this equation to play out and then eventually get the solutions that we need. So this is where I think the leadership by the political leaders, economic community, private sector, et cetera, is vital. We need to really get them acting on that, and to be able to act on it, we need science to back us for some of the new things that we're trying to do, and how do we make sure that that comes together. The key, of course, is not making matters worse by introducing things that are not tested or that we know that they work well. But at the same time, leaving things as is not a solution either, because the climate impacts are making a difference, unfortunately adversely, to the community, and we need to be mindful of that.
So it's been a great panel. We have about 2 minutes left. And I just would like to offer all of you to be able to say just a really few seconds worth of an ending statement. And Justin, I'm going to let you go first, but it's got to be all of us brief. I'm sorry.
Thanks, but I'll say two very quick things. In answer to your last question, I think we just now need to scare the heebie-jeebie ab-jabs out of most politicians. We don't have time. So I think, the security threat, we're going to have 1.4 billion people on the move in 15 years' time. We've got 200 million at the moment. I think the thing which gives me hope, and I can depress people and render them to tears quickly, the thing that gives me hope in a serious way is that we have in this audience here, the majority of people here are female. The great benefit now of having this community being led very frequently by women is that it tends to be the habit of women to be empathetic and to demonstrate that we are all connected rather than actually demonstrating that we're all divided. Yeah. And if we could take that and expand it, the world would be a much safer place.
Well,
That's it.
we take it. Do we have just a few more minutes, and we'll continue?
Leadership matters, and who you elect into that position matters, and we need to be.
Thank you.
We need to elect people who understand that their job is to define and defend public interest. That's it.
Yep. Agreed.
So I'll just say what gives me hope is seeing that when nature is protected, it can recover. Yeah. So we make those protections act, and it can recover.
I don't know that I have much to add. We need to elect climate champions. We need to be united in how we do it. And when we do that, we recover. Mm-hmm. So the future is possible when we employ these leadership tactics.
That's great. We're going to sit here and ask our final commenter to come up and wind us up. But I do want to say one thing. I think one last thing I think is necessary in leadership, and I think that is listening to traditional knowledge, acting on it. I think we've got to go as far as, the carrot and the stick. You've got to do this, because otherwise we're going to miss so much. I mean, we need to be inclusive, and I'm always happy to see that brought to fruition. So, all right, we're ready for our next person. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you to the entire panel for that incredible conversation. So I am pleased to introduce Cristina Rodriguez for closing remarks here on the panel. Hailing from Miami, Florida, Cristina Rodriguez is the lead research fellow at Ocean Conservancy, focusing on equity and justice in the life cycle of plastics. Rodriguez holds a master's in climate policy and solutions from Yale, specializing in nature-based solutions and coastal ecosystem conservation. While as a student at University of Florida, Cristina founded the Strong Roots Movement, a nonprofit that provides organic garden beds to underserved youth centers in food deserts. She also started a chapter of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance and was president of her university chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. For closing remarks, please welcome Cristina Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, everyone and esteemed colleagues. First, happy Ocean Week and happy Pride. I would also like to clarify I'm here on behalf of the UNFCCC High-Level Climate Champions, and previously I was doing research with Ocean Conservancy. But what a truly thought-provoking panel and engaging presentation we've heard so far. Thank you all so much. It's truly a privilege to be with you all to discuss the importance of fostering leadership to advance climate action and building resilience through diverse and innovative policy and multi-stakeholder solutions at CHOW. Of course, a very sincere thank you to the Foundation for coordinating and hosting such a critical and timely convening. As it was just mentioned, my name is Cristina Rodriguez, and I'm here to share some reflections from my Ocean and Coastal Zones Fellowship with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change High-Level Climate Champions team. This mandate, developed under the Paris Agreement, aims to mobilize stronger and more ambitious climate action from non-state actors to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. During my fellowship, I've seen firsthand the power of civil society and community-driven initiatives. The mandate of the Paris Agreement to mobilize non-state actors is a call to action for all of us. Under the leadership of the high-level champions, the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action for Ocean and Coastal Zones serves as a global coalition bringing together over 120 organizations, including civil society organizations, business and private sector leaders, indigenous populations, research and academic institutes, and international organizations to raise ambition and accelerate ocean-based climate solutions. Growing up in Miami, Florida, I've been privileged to call the Atlantic Ocean my backyard. Although I witnessed firsthand the impact of rising sea levels and more powerful and damaging storm surges, resulting in more flooding, greater property, and infrastructure damage. As the flooding intensified, equity and displacement considerations worsened and economic damages grew while solutions remained inadequate. I've seen hurricanes grow stronger, intensify faster, and cause more damage due to climate change heating up the air and ocean. What were once deemed as rare Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes have now become the norm during hurricane season. Of course, this trend extends far past Florida's coastlines, and what we're witnessing on a global scale demands global action. The ocean was the hottest ever recorded in human history in 2023. And 99% of corals will be lost if global temperatures increase by 2 degrees Celsius from historical levels. Ocean health, climate change, poverty, food security, and biodiversity are therefore undeniably intertwined. Despite this, and as it was mentioned, oceans today are the least invested of all United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 14, life below water. Despite the crucial role of oceans in mitigating and adapting to climate change, they receive a minuscule portion of climate finance, with just around 1% of total adaptation finance being invested in ocean and coastal protections. This sobering milestone underscores the urgency of our mission here today. Reflecting on this incredibly rich panel and the discussions we've seen throughout today, it's clear that the path forward demands a whole-of-society approach. We need robust policies that scale proven nature-based solutions and improve coordination across policy, science, and financial strategies to adapt to our changing planet. The ocean is a powerful source of untapped solution. It's been proven that full implementation of ocean-based climate measures could reduce the emissions gap by up to 35% on a 1.5 degrees pathway by 2050. The benefits extend well beyond climate. When sustainably managed, the ocean can spur economic growth enhance well-being, and help to meet the food and energy demands of a growing population. Governments are now aware of the ocean's tremendous potential, with 70% of new or updated nationally determined NDCs, or nationally determined contributions, NDCs, including at least one ocean-based climate solution. However, a lot remains to be done to reach the full potential of scaling ocean-based climate solutions in the years to come. And this can only be achieved through meaningful collaboration across all stakeholders with a long-term vision and common goals. Leading with ambition, the Ocean and Coastal Zone community under the Marrakesh Partnership launched a set of ocean breakthroughs, serving as science-based targets designed to boost mitigation and adaptation efforts for the benefit of people and nature, and dive into 5 different sectors: marine conservation, which might sound familiar for those of you familiar with the mangrove breakthrough as well as the coral reef breakthrough; ocean renewable energy, ocean-based transport, aquatic food systems, and coastal tourism, with the belief that accelerated action and investment in each of these sectors will help unlock the potential of the ocean as a source of solutions to the pressing challenges posed by climate change and biodiversity loss. The Mangrove Breakthrough, I'll mention briefly, is a global initiative and serves as a multi-stakeholder rallying call for accelerated action and investments, calling on governments, the private sector, and non-state actors to protect and restore over 37 million acres of mangroves globally by 2030. The significance of mangroves offering food, extreme weather, protection, livelihoods, coastal resilience, and acting as substantial carbon sinks underscores their role as a critical asset in the fight against climate change and the biodiversity crisis, and are also just a great nature-based solutions. Over the next few days throughout CHOW, as we exchange knowledge, we must focus on driving on-the-ground implementation, capacity building, deploying resources, and scaling financial mechanisms to tackle the significant funding gap and ensure our contributions are meaningful, productive, equitable, and science-based, with community organizations leading the charge. Most importantly, we need to ensure that those most affected by climate change are changing the tide. Frontline communities offer invaluable insights and solutions born out of necessity and resilience. By centering these leaders, we create solutions that are effective, equitable, and just, while building a global network locally led and locally designed. Together, we can forge a path that scales climate solutions towards a net zero, nature positive, and resilient ocean. To everyone here, thank you so much for your dedicated commitments, passion, and continued efforts to protect our ocean and our coast. Keep paddling your canoe. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You can get up and head out. Thank you to all of our distinguished panelists. We really appreciate that conversation. Thank you, Beth, for moderating. Just to let everyone know, we are going to be now taking our afternoon lunch break, and we would like to ask you all to be back here at 12:30. Just a couple of quick notes. If you are tagging us on social media, go ahead and use that CHOW 2024 hashtag. And please spend time at the incredible exhibit booths out in the hall. And take the opportunity to connect with one another. Just down the hall, all the way at the end, is a food court. If anyone needs to get something hot to steel themselves for a great afternoon. Thank you for a wonderful morning, and we'll see you back here at 12:30.
No, don't worry.
10 minutes.
I know.
Sorry. Eat really fast. Thank you, sir. That was a great conversation.